The restaurant was quiet, except for the soft clink of silverware and low murmur of conversations. Rachel Parker sat across from her blind date, hands folded nervously in her lap, when he leaned back with a cold smile and said, "Let me be honest with you. I'm not looking for used goods." The words hit like a slap. Around them, heads turned. A few conversations stopped mid-sentence. Rachel's face burned as shame flooded through her, rooting her to the spot. But what happened next? No one in that restaurant would ever forget. Would you have done what he did? 3 hours earlier, Rachel had stood in front of her bathroom mirror, stomach tight with nerves. At 32, she hadn't been on a date in over 3 years. Not since the divorce. Not since everything fell apart. She adjusted the simple navy dress she'd borrowed from her friend Sarah, then glanced toward the living room where her 7-year-old son Eli was building a tower with blocks. "Mommy, are you going somewhere fancy?" he'd asked earlier, eyes wide. "Just dinner, sweetheart. Aunt Sarah will be here soon to stay with you." The truth was, she almost canceled. 4 times that afternoon, she'd hovered over her phone, ready to send the apology text. But Sarah had been firm when she dropped off the dress. "Rachel, you deserve this. You deserve to be happy again." Did she, though? Her ex-husband's voice still echoed sometimes, the words he'd thrown at her the day he left. "I can't do this. I can't be tied down to someone else's drama." Someone else's drama. That's what he'd called their unborn son. He'd walked out when she was 5 months pregnant, moved across the country, remarried within a year. Eli had never met his father, never even received a birthday card. For 3 years, Rachel had poured everything into being enough for both of them. She worked at a small bookstore on Main Street, barely making ends meet, but they had a roof over their heads and food on the table. They had each other. Most days, that felt like enough, but on quiet nights after Eli fell asleep, the loneliness crept in. Sarah had set up the blind date through a friend of a friend. Chris worked in finance, never been married, looking for something serious. "He seems nice," Sarah had promised. "Just give it a chance." So here Rachel was, lipstick carefully applied, hands shaking slightly as she locked the front door and drove to Bella Vista, the nicest restaurant in town, the kind of place she could never afford on her own. She'd arrived 10 minutes early, too anxious to wait at home. The host had shown her to a table near the window, and she'd sat there clutching the menu, watching the door, telling herself it would be fine. It would be fine. Except deep down, beneath the hope she was trying so hard to hold on to, fear whispered that nothing was ever really fine, that she was fooling herself, that no one would want a single mother working a minimum wage job with a past full of broken promises. She'd almost convinced herself to leave when the door opened, and a man in an expensive suit walked in, scanning the room. Chris. He spotted her, smiled, and headed over. Rachel's heart hammered as she stood to greet him, smoothing her dress one more time, forcing her brightest smile. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe she did deserve this. Maybe tonight would be different. Bella Vista was everything Rachel had imagined and more. Soft candlelight flickered on every table, casting warm shadows across cream-colored tablecloths. Classical music played low in the background, just barely audible beneath the gentle conversation of other diners. The air smelled like garlic and fresh bread, and through the tall windows, the evening sun painted the street outside in shades of gold. Chris slid into the seat across from her with the easy confidence of someone who belonged in places like this. His suit was perfectly tailored, his watch expensive, his smile practiced. "Rachel, right?" He extended his hand across the table. "Chris Bennett. Sorry I'm a few minutes late. Traffic." "No problem at all." She shook his hand, trying to ignore how clammy her own palm felt. "Thank you for suggesting this place." "It's beautiful." "I come here often." He glanced at the menu without really looking at it. "The steak is excellent. So is the salmon, if you prefer seafood. Rachel nodded, scanning the prices and feeling her stomach drop. Everything was at least $30. She'd budgeted carefully for tonight, enough to cover her half of a reasonable meal, but this was beyond reasonable. "So, Sarah tells me you work at a bookstore?" Chris asked, setting down his menu. "Yes, the corner book nook on Main Street. It's small, but I love it. There's something special about helping people find the right book." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "That's nice. Quaint. What does that pay, if you don't mind me asking?" Rachel's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, it's modest. But it's enough." "Enough for what?" The question hung in the air, pointed and sharp. Rachel shifted in her seat. "Enough to take care of my son and myself. We live simply." "Your son?" Chris leaned back, studying her. "How old?" 7. "His name is Eli." "And the father?" The warmth drained from the room. Rachel felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the one that always came when someone asked about Eli's father. She'd learned to keep her answer simple, factual, free of the bitterness that sometimes threatened to creep in. "He's not in the picture. We've been on our own for a while now." Chris nodded slowly, his fingers drumming once on the table. "So you're divorced?" "Yes." "When?" "About 3 years ago." The waiter arrived then, a young man with a kind face who seemed to sense the tension. He took their drink orders, water for Rachel, scotch for Chris, and retreated quickly. At a table nearby, Rachel noticed a man sitting with a little girl, maybe 6 years old. The child was coloring in a book while the man watched with a gentle smile. Something about the scene made Rachel's chest ache. That's what Eli deserved. A father who looked at him like that. Chris was still watching her, his expression unreadable. "So let me make sure I understand. You're a single mother, working retail, living paycheck to paycheck." The way he said it made it sound like a criminal record. "I wouldn't put it that way exactly," Rachel said carefully. "I'm a mother, doing her best to raise her son with love and stability. I work hard. We're happy." "I'm sure you are." Chris took a sip of the scotch the waiter had just delivered. "But let's be realistic here, Rachel. I'm looking for a partner, not a project. Someone who brings something to the table. Someone who's got their life together." Rachel's mouth went dry. The words stung, but she tried to keep her voice steady. "I do have my life together. It might not look like yours, but come on." He waved a hand dismissively. "You know what I mean. No offense, but you've already got baggage. A kid from another guy, financial struggles, emotional history. I'm 43 years old. I've worked hard to build my life. I want someone who complements that, not someone who needs rescuing." The restaurant seemed to shrink around her. Rachel was vaguely aware that the conversation at the next table had gone quiet. The man with the little girl was no longer smiling. "I don't need rescuing," Rachel said quietly, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "And my son isn't baggage." Chris shrugged. "I'm just being honest. You seem like a nice person, but let me be clear about what I'm looking for." He leaned forward, lowering his voice slightly. "I'm not interested in used goods. I want someone fresh, someone without all the complications. Someone I can build a life with from scratch, not inherit someone else's mess." Used goods. The words echoed in Rachel's head, louder than the music, louder than the blood rushing in her ears. Used goods. Her vision blurred. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All around her, she felt eyes turning, faces registering what they'd just heard. The humiliation was complete, suffocating. She should leave. She should stand up, walk out with whatever dignity she had left, and never look back. But she couldn't move. She was frozen, pinned to the chair by shame and shock and the terrible, crushing weight of being reduced to nothing in a room full of strangers. The silence at the table stretched, like a wire pulled too tight. Chris picked up his menu again, seemingly unbothered by the bomb he'd just dropped. He glanced at the entrees, as if he hadn't just called another human being used goods in the middle of a crowded restaurant. Rachel sat frozen, her entire body numb except for the burning in her cheeks. She could feel the stares now, no longer imagined, but real. The elderly couple 2 tables over had stopped eating. The young woman by the window had her hand over her mouth. Even the waiter, approaching with bread, had slowed his steps, clearly having heard enough to know something terrible had just happened. Chris finally looked up from his menu. "You're not going to cry, are you? Because that would be awkward." The cruelty of it, the casual, careless cruelty, sent a fresh wave of humiliation through Rachel. Her throat was so tight, she couldn't speak. Tears pressed hot against her eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. But God, she wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor, to rewind the last 30 minutes and delete this entire night from existence. This was a mistake. Sarah had been wrong. Rachel wasn't ready for this. Maybe she'd never be ready. Maybe Chris was right. Maybe she was too damaged, too broken, too much of a mess for anyone to. "Excuse me." The voice came from the table next to them, deep, calm, but carrying an edge that made everyone within earshot turn. The man with the little girl had stood up. He was tall, maybe 6 feet, with dark hair and the kind of face that looked both tired and kind at the same time. His daughter looked up at him in confusion, still clutching her purple crayon. Chris turned, eyebrows raised. "Can I help you?" "Actually," the man said, his eyes steady on Chris, "I think you need help, because what I just heard you say to this woman is one of the most disgusting things I've ever witnessed in public." Rachel's breath caught. She stared at the stranger, unable to process what was happening. Chris's face hardened. "I'm sorry, but this is a private conversation." "No." The man took a step closer, not threatening, but unmistakably present. "When you say something like that loud enough for half the restaurant to hear, it stops being private. It becomes everyone's business. Especially when you're sitting here degrading another human being like she's an object you're inspecting at a yard sale." "Daddy?" The little girl's voice was small, worried. The man glanced back at her. "It's okay, Lily. I just need to talk to this gentleman for a minute." He turned back to Chris, and when he spoke again, his voice was quieter, but somehow more powerful. "I don't know what makes you think you have the right to speak to anyone the way you just spoke to her. But let me tell you something. A woman with a child isn't used goods. She's a person who loved, who built a life, who brought someone into this world and chose to stay and raise them even when it got hard. That takes more courage than you or I could probably imagine." Chris's jaw tightened. "Look, buddy, I don't know who you think you are. I'm someone who knows what it's like to be a single parent." The man cut him off. "I'm someone who understands that life doesn't go the way we plan. And I'm someone who can't sit here and watch you tear down a woman who has done nothing wrong except have the misfortune of sitting across from you tonight." The restaurant was dead silent now. Even the kitchen noise had faded. Every eye was on their corner of the room. Rachel's hands were shaking. She didn't know this man, didn't know why he was doing this. But something inside her chest was cracking open, and she didn't know if she wanted to cry from embarrassment or relief or gratitude. Chris stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is ridiculous. I'm not going to sit here and be lectured by some random guy who can't mind his own business." "Then leave," the man said simply, "because what you're not going to do is sit here and continue disrespecting her." For a moment, Chris looked like he might argue. His face was red, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. But perhaps it was the weight of all those watching eyes, or the quiet certainty in the stranger's voice, or simply the realization that he'd lost control of the situation entirely. He grabbed his coat from the back of his chair. You know what? You two deserve each other. Enjoy your evening. He threw two $20 bills on the table, not enough to cover even his drink, and stalked toward the exit. The door swung shut behind him. The silence that followed was different now. Softer. Almost reverent. Rachel finally managed to breathe. The tears she'd been holding back spilled over, running hot down her cheeks. She covered her face with her hands, shoulders shaking. She heard footsteps, then a gentle voice. Hey, you're okay. He's gone. The stranger had moved closer, crouching slightly so he was at eye level with her chair. His daughter had come with him, hovering behind his leg, peeking out at Rachel with wide brown eyes. I'm so sorry, Rachel choked out. I'm so sorry, No. His voice was firm but kind. You have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. Rachel lowered her hands, trying to wipe away the tears with trembling fingers. She looked at him properly for the first time. He had dark eyes that crinkled slightly at the corners, like he smiled often. There was a small scar above his left eyebrow. He wore a simple blue button-down shirt, slightly rumpled, like he'd come straight from work. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know why you did that, but thank you. He offered a small, sad smile. Because someone needed to. And because what he said wasn't just wrong, it was cruel. He straightened up, glancing at his daughter. Lily, can you say hi? The little girl stepped out from behind him. She had dark curls pulled into two pigtails and wore a pink dress covered in tiny flowers. Hi, she said shyly. Are you okay? You look sad. Rachel couldn't help but let out a small, watery laugh. I am sad, but I'm getting better now, thanks to you and your dad. Lily smiled. Daddy says people should be nice to each other. That mean man wasn't nice. No, he wasn't, the man agreed. He extended his hand to Rachel. I'm Daniel Cole. And you've already met Lily. Rachel shook his hand. His grip was warm, steady. Rachel Parker. It's nice to meet you, Rachel. Though I wish it were under better circumstances. Daniel glanced at the empty chair across from her, then at his own table. Look, I know this is probably weird, but Lily and I haven't ordered yet, and you shouldn't have to sit here alone after what just happened. Would you want to join us? Rachel blinked. Oh, I couldn't. I don't want to intrude on your dinner. You wouldn't be intruding, Lily piped up. We like company. Right, Daddy? Daniel smiled down at his daughter, then back at Rachel. Only if you want to. No pressure. But the offer's there. Rachel looked at the table where Chris had been sitting, at the menu still lying open, at the water glass he'd left behind. Then she looked at Daniel and Lily. At their kind faces, at the genuine warmth in their expressions. Something in her chest loosened, just a little. Okay, she heard herself say. Yes, thank you. Daniel pulled out a chair at his table for Rachel. She settled into it carefully, still feeling the weight of curious eyes around the restaurant, though the other diners had begun returning to their own conversations, quietly, as if afraid to break whatever fragile spell had settled over the room. Lily climbed back into her seat and immediately pushed her coloring book toward Rachel. Do you like unicorns? I'm coloring a unicorn. Rachel smiled, the first genuine smile of the evening. I love unicorns. That's a beautiful purple you chose. It's lavender, Lily corrected solemnly. Purple is different. You're absolutely right. Lavender. Daniel sat down across from them. And for a moment he just looked at Rachel with an expression she couldn't quite read. Concern, maybe. Or understanding. Are you sure you're okay? He asked quietly. That was a lot. Rachel nodded, though her hands were still trembling slightly. She folded them in her lap. "I'll be okay. I just feel so stupid." "Why would you feel stupid?" "Because I should have seen it coming. The way he was asking questions, the way he looked at me, She stopped, shaking her head. "I thought maybe I was being paranoid. I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt." "That doesn't make you stupid," Daniel said firmly. "That makes you human and hopeful. Those are good things." The waiter appeared then, the same young man from before. He looked at Rachel with unmistakable sympathy. "Ma'am, I just want you to know that management has comped your meal tonight. Whatever you'd like to order, it's on the house." Rachel's eyes widened. "Oh, that's not necessary." "It absolutely is," the waiter said. "What that guy said was completely out of line. We don't tolerate that kind of behavior here. I'm just sorry no one from staff stepped in sooner." "Thank you," Rachel managed. "That's very kind." After the waiter took their orders, pasta for Lily, steak for Daniel, and a salmon dish for Rachel that she chose at random because she still couldn't quite focus, Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure." "Do you believe what he said? About being used goods?" The question hit harder than Rachel expected. She looked down at the tablecloth, tracing an invisible pattern with her finger. "I don't want to believe it, but sometimes late at night, when it's just me and the walls closing in, yeah. Sometimes I wonder if he's right. If having Eli, being divorced, struggling financially, if all of that makes me less desirable, less worthy." "It doesn't." Rachel looked up. Daniel's gaze was steady, serious. "It doesn't make you less anything," he continued. "If anything, it makes you more. More resilient. More compassionate. More real." He paused. "Do you want to know what I see when I look at you?" Rachel wasn't sure she did, but she nodded anyway. "I see someone who kept going when it would have been easier to give up. I see someone who puts her child first, even when it means sacrificing what she might want for herself. I see someone brave enough to walk into a restaurant and try again, even after being hurt before." His voice softened. "That's not used goods, Rachel. That's strength." The tears came again, but they felt different this time, cleaner somehow. Lily, who had been coloring quietly, looked up. "Are you sad again?" "No, sweetie," Rachel said, wiping her eyes. "These are happy tears." "Oh, okay." Lily seemed to accept this and went back to her coloring. Daniel smiled slightly. "She asks a lot of questions. Fair warning. I have a 7-year-old son. I'm used to questions. What's his name?" "Eli." "That's a good name. Strong." Daniel tilted his head. "Does he know you were going on a date tonight?" "Not really. He just knows I went to dinner. He's with my friend Sarah." Rachel felt a pang of guilt. "I should probably text her. Let her know I'm okay." "You should. Take your time." Rachel pulled out her phone and sent a quick message to Sarah. "Date was a disaster, but I'm okay. Long story. We'll call later." Sarah's response came almost immediately. "Oh no. Want me to come get you?" Rachel glanced at Daniel and Lily, at the way the candlelight softened the edges of the room, at how something that had started so horribly had somehow transformed into something almost peaceful. She typed back, "No, I'm actually having dinner with some new friends. I'm okay, really." She put her phone away and looked up to find Daniel watching her. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Yeah, just letting my friend know I survived." Their food arrived, and they ate slowly, talking about small things. Lily chattered about her school, about her favorite teacher, about the loose tooth that was driving her crazy. Rachel found herself laughing, actually laughing, at Lily's animated descriptions. "She has a lot of energy," Daniel said with a fond smile. "Sometimes I don't know where she gets it." "How old is she?" Rachel asked. 6. She'll be 7 in November. So close to Eli's age. "Yeah," Daniel cut into his steak, then paused. Can I be honest with you about something? Of course. The reason I spoke up tonight wasn't just because what that guy said was wrong, though it absolutely was. He set down his fork. It's because 2 years ago my wife died. Cancer. And for months after that, I felt like I was drowning. I was a single dad who had no idea what he was doing, trying to raise a little girl who kept asking when mommy was coming home. Rachel's breath caught. Daniel. I'm so sorry. Thank you. It's getting easier, slowly. But my point is, people said things to me during that time. Things they probably thought were helpful, but were actually cruel. Things like, at least she's in a better place, or you're young, you'll find someone else, or are you sure you can handle raising a daughter alone? His jaw tightened. And I wanted to scream at them that my wife wasn't replaceable, that I didn't need their permission to grieve, that I was handling it the best I could. He looked at Rachel, and his eyes were full of something raw and real. So when I heard that guy reduce your entire life, your entire journey, to used goods, it was like hearing all those careless, cutting comments all over again, and I couldn't let it stand. I couldn't let someone make you feel the way people made me feel, like my pain didn't matter, like my life didn't count just because it didn't look the way other people thought it should. Rachel's throat was tight. Thank you for telling me that, and I'm sorry for what you went through, what you're still going through. We're all going through something, Daniel said quietly. That's the thing people forget. Everyone's carrying something heavy. The least we can do is not make it heavier for each other. Lily, who had been mostly focused on her pasta, suddenly looked up. Daddy, can Rachel come to the park with us sometime? I want to show her the swings. Daniel looked surprised. Lily, you can't just. It's okay, Rachel found herself saying. I'd love to, if that's okay with your dad. Daniel met her eyes. And something passed between them. An understanding, maybe, or a recognition. Two people who had been broken in different ways, finding an unexpected moment of grace in the wreckage. Yeah, he said softly. That would be nice. The rest of the dinner passed in comfortable conversation. Rachel learned that Daniel worked as an architect, that he loved old movies and terrible dad jokes, that he still struggled to braid Lily's hair, but was determined to get better at it. She told him about her job at the bookstore, about how Eli loved dinosaurs and wanted to be a paleontologist, about how she was trying to save up for a better apartment, but it never quite seemed to happen. By the time they finished eating, Rachel realized something had shifted. The humiliation from earlier hadn't disappeared. It still sat heavy in her chest, but it was no longer the only thing she felt. There was something else now, too. Something lighter. Hope, maybe. Or just the simple comfort of being seen as a whole person instead of a collection of mistakes. When the check came, Daniel insisted on paying despite Rachel's protests. Consider it an apology on behalf of men everywhere, he said with a slight smile. They walked out together into the cool evening air. The sun had fully set, and streetlights cast pools of gold on the sidewalk. Thank you, Rachel said again, for everything. For standing up for me, for dinner, for just being kind. You don't have to keep thanking me, Daniel said. Kindness should be the default, not the exception. Lily tugged on Rachel's hand. Will you really come to the park? Rachel crouched down to the little girl's level. I really will, I promise. And can we meet Eli? I think Eli would really like that. As they said their goodbyes and went to their separate cars, Rachel felt her phone buzz. A text from an unknown number. This is Daniel. Lily made me promise to get your number so we could set up that park playdate. Also, I just wanted to say, you handled tonight with a lot of grace. That guy didn't deserve a minute of your time, but I'm glad I got to spend the rest of the evening with you. Take care, Rachel. She read the message twice, then smiled, a real unguarded smile, and typed back, "Thank you. For everything." Same time next week, his response came quickly. "It's a date. Well, not a date, just a friend date, a play date. This is coming out wrong." "Yes, same time next week works great." Rachel laughed out loud in her car, and it felt like the first real laugh she'd had in months. As she drove home through the quiet streets, past the familiar shops and houses, she thought about what Daniel had said, about everyone carrying something heavy, about not making it heavier for each other. Maybe Chris had been right about one thing. She did have baggage. She had a past full of hurt and a present full of struggle and a future full of uncertainty. But maybe, just maybe, that didn't make her used goods. Maybe it just made her human. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, that was enough. Rachel drove home that night with the windows down, letting the cool October air wash over her face. Her hands were steady on the wheel now. The trembling from earlier finally subsided. The shame was still there. She doubted it would vanish overnight. But it had shifted somehow, made room for something else. When she pulled into the driveway of her small apartment building, she sat in the car for a moment, just breathing. Through the lit window on the second floor, she could see Sarah moving around inside, probably cleaning up after putting Eli to bed. Rachel pulled out her phone and looked at Daniel's last text again. "Same time next week works great." She hadn't been sure if she'd ever want to go on another date after tonight. But somehow, the idea of seeing Daniel and Lily again, in a park, in daylight, with no pressure or expectations, felt safe, felt right. She climbed the stairs and unlocked the door quietly. Sarah looked up from the couch where she'd been folding the blanket Eli used for movie nights. "Hey," Sarah said softly, her face full of concern. "I've been worried sick. What happened?" Rachel set down her purse and sank into the armchair across from her friend. For a long moment, she didn't know where to start. Then the words came tumbling out. Chris's questions, his judgment, the terrible moment when he'd called her used goods, the silence of the restaurant, her complete humiliation. Sarah's face darkened with anger. That absolute piece of— "Wait," Rachel interrupted. "That's not all." She told Sarah about Daniel, about how he'd stood up from his table, how he'd confronted Chris with calm certainty, how his 6-year-old daughter had offered her purple crayon and asked if she was okay. She told her about the dinner they'd shared, about Daniel's own story of loss, about the playdate they'd planned for next week. By the time she finished, Sarah's expression had transformed from fury to something softer. "So let me get this straight," Sarah said slowly. "You went on the worst date of your life, got publicly humiliated, and somehow ended the night having dinner with a widowed single dad and his adorable daughter, who wants to go to the park with you? That's basically it, yeah." Sarah shook her head in wonder. "Only you, Rachel. Only you could turn a disaster into something beautiful." "I don't know about beautiful," Rachel said, "but it was kind. He was kind. And I forgot what that felt like, you know? To have someone defend you without wanting anything in return. Did he ask you out?" "No." "Well, sort of. But not like that. It's for the kids, really. Lily and Eli. A playdate." Sarah raised an eyebrow. A playdate? Where the 2 single parents will be there supervising. Together. Talking. Getting to know each other. Sarah, I'm just saying, this might be the universe making up for Chris being a horrible human being. Sarah reached over and squeezed Rachel's hand. You deserve someone who sees you for who you are, not what you've been through. After Sarah left, Rachel checked on Eli. He was sprawled across his bed in his dinosaur pajamas, mouth slightly open, one arm thrown over his stuffed triceratops. She stood in the doorway watching him sleep, thinking about what Daniel had said. I see someone who puts her child first, even when it means sacrificing what she might want for herself. Was that what she'd been doing? Sacrificing? Or was it just living? Being a mother? Doing what needed to be done? She thought about the dates she'd turned down over the years, the social events she'd skipped because she couldn't afford a babysitter, the dreams she'd quietly shelved because Eli's needs came first. She'd never resented it. Not really. Eli was her whole world. But maybe Daniel was right. Maybe there was courage in that. Maybe choosing to stay, to love, to keep going when it got hard. Maybe that wasn't weakness. Maybe it was the opposite. Rachel pulled Eli's blanket up over his shoulders and kissed his forehead. He stirred slightly, mumbled something about velociraptors, and settled back into sleep. In her own room, Rachel changed into her pajamas and sat on the edge of her bed with her phone. She scrolled through her messages, past the conversation with Sarah, past old texts from her mother and co-workers, until she found Daniel's number. She typed, "Thank you again for tonight. You turned something awful into something I'll actually remember fondly. That's a gift." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. His response came a few minutes later. "The gift was getting to meet you. Sleep well, Rachel. Better days ahead." She read it 3 times before setting her phone on the nightstand and turning off the light. In the darkness, she thought about Chris's words. Used goods. She'd probably think about them for a long time, probably hear them echo in her worst moments of self-doubt. But she'd also think about Daniel's words, about strength, about resilience, about being more, not less. And maybe eventually, Daniel's words would be the ones that stuck. They moved to Daniel's table. Lily immediately pushed her coloring book toward Rachel. "Do you like unicorns?" Rachel smiled, the first genuine smile of the evening. "I love unicorns." The waiter appeared, telling Rachel that management had comped her meal. After they ordered, Daniel looked at her seriously. "Do you believe what he said? About being used goods?" Rachel traced an invisible pattern on the tablecloth. "I don't want to believe it. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder if having Eli, being divorced, struggling financially, if all of that makes me less worthy." "It doesn't," Daniel said firmly. "If anything, it makes you more. More resilient. More compassionate. More real." He leaned forward. "I see someone who kept going when it would have been easier to give up. I see someone who puts her child first. I see someone brave enough to try again even after being hurt. That's not used goods, Rachel. That's strength." The tears came again, but they felt different this time, cleaner somehow. "Can I be honest with you about something?" Daniel asked as they ate. "Of course. My wife died 2 years ago, cancer, and for months after that I felt like I was drowning. I was a single dad who had no idea what he was doing, trying to raise a little girl who kept asking when mommy was coming home." Rachel's breath caught. "Daniel, I'm so sorry." "Thank you. But my point is, people said things to me during that time that were cruel, even if they didn't mean them to be. Things like, 'You're young, you'll find someone else.' Or, 'Are you sure you can handle raising a daughter alone?'" His jaw tightened. "So when I heard that guy reduce your entire life to used goods, I couldn't let it stand." "Thank you," Rachel whispered, "for standing up for me." They finished their meal in comfortable conversation. Lily chattered about school. Rachel told them about Eli's dinosaur collection. By the time they left, Rachel felt something she hadn't felt in years. Seen. At their cars, Daniel said, "Lily made me promise to get your number so we could set up a play date." Rachel smiled. "I'd like that." That night, as she drove home, Rachel's phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "This is Daniel. I just wanted to say, you handled tonight with a lot of grace. That guy didn't deserve a minute of your time, but I'm glad I got to spend the rest of the evening with you." Rachel read it 3 times before typing back. "Thank you. For everything." Same time next week, his response came quickly. "It's a date." Well, not a date, just a play date. Same time next week works great. Rachel laughed out loud in her car. For the first time in a long time, she felt hope. The following Saturday, they met at Miller Park. Eli and Lily hit it off immediately, racing toward the swings with easy friendship. Rachel and Daniel sat on a bench, watching their children play. "He's sweet with her," Daniel observed. "Patient." "He's always wanted a sibling," Rachel said quietly. Over the next weeks, Saturdays became their day. The zoo, the children's museum, the pumpkin patch. Each meeting, Rachel felt herself opening up more, the walls around her heart slowly coming down. One evening, Daniel came over while Eli was asleep. They cooked together in Rachel's small kitchen, laughing when Daniel admitted he was terrible at cutting vegetables uniformly. "This is nice," Daniel said. "Domestic. Is that a good thing?" "It's a great thing." At the door, Daniel squeezed her hand. "Thank you for tonight." After he left, Rachel stood with her back against the door, hand pressed to her chest, where her heart was racing. They were building something. Slowly, carefully, but they were building it nonetheless. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, they took the kids to the Science Museum. While the children explored the dinosaur section, Rachel and Daniel found themselves in front of a giant model of a heart. "Rachel," Daniel said quietly, taking her hand for the first time. "I need to tell you something." Her heart picked up speed. "Okay." "That night at the restaurant, when I heard what Chris said to you, I stood up because even as a complete stranger, I could see that you were more than whatever shallow criteria he was using. And now, knowing you," his voice caught. "You're not used goods, Rachel. You're proof that the human heart can break and heal and still have room to love. The world doesn't get to decide what used means. Only you do. And I'm watching you decide, every single day, that you're worthy. That choice to keep going, to keep believing, that's the bravest thing I've ever seen." Rachel was crying. "You make me want to be brave too. Before I met you, I thought surviving was enough. But you've shown me that I can do more than survive. I can actually live." Daniel pulled her into a hug. "We're healing each other." That evening, they took the kids for ice cream. At the door of Rachel's apartment, Daniel said, "I'm falling for you, Rachel. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that out loud yet, but I am." Rachel looked up at him. "I'm falling for you too." This time, when he leaned down, Rachel met him halfway. The kiss was gentle, tentative, perfect. When they pulled apart, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. "Worth the wait." "Definitely worth the wait," she agreed. Thanksgiving came with an invitation to Daniel's sister Anna's house. The gathering was warm and loud and welcoming. Anna pulled Rachel into a hug immediately. "Daniel talks about you constantly," Anna said. "It's actually a little annoying how much he talks about you." Throughout the day, Rachel felt herself relaxing into this new family. At dinner, when they shared what they were grateful for, Daniel looked directly at her. "I'm grateful for second chances, for people who see past what's broken to what's still beautiful. I'm grateful for Rachel and Eli, for letting us be part of their lives." When it was Rachel's turn, she said, "I'm grateful for kindness, for people who stand up when they see something wrong, for my son, who teaches me what unconditional love looks like, and for second chances, for being brave enough to try again." Eli added simply, "I'm thankful for dinosaurs, and my new friend Lily, and that Mom's not sad anymore." Later, on the back porch with Anna, Daniel's sister said, "I want you to know how much you matter. You're the person who reminded Daniel that life after loss is still worth living." "He's helped me heal too," Rachel said softly. That night, saying goodbye in the driveway, Daniel carried sleeping Eli to the car. Then he turned to Rachel. "I love you," he said quietly. "I know it's soon, but I love you, Rachel." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "I love you too. So much it scares me sometimes." "The best kind of scared," Daniel agreed. By January, they were making plans. Daniel asked Rachel and Eli to move in with them. "I want us to be a family, officially," he said. Rachel thought about her small apartment, then about Daniel's house with the big backyard and the warmth of a real home. "Okay," she whispered. "Yes." One evening in late January, Daniel brought up the future. "I need to know where your head is at, because I'm all in. I want marriage and forever. But I need to know if that's what you want too." Rachel's hands trembled. "I want that. I'm just scared of it. Because I failed once." "You didn't fail your first marriage. He failed you." Daniel took her hands. "You don't have to be fully healed to be fully loved." Rachel felt something inside her crack open. "Someday, when you're ready. Ask me, and I'll say yes." Daniel smiled. "Is that a promise?" "It's a promise." March came, and Rachel moved in. 1 year after that disastrous blind date, Daniel made a reservation at Bella Vista. "Why are we going back there?" Rachel asked. "That's where I met you," Daniel said simply. They were seated at the same table. After dinner, Daniel handed her a small wrapped box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace, a heart with a crack through the middle filled with gold. "It's called kintsugi," Daniel explained. "The idea is that the piece is more beautiful for having been broken. You are not used goods, Rachel. You are kintsugi. Beautiful because of what you've been through." Rachel couldn't speak. Then Daniel said, "There's something else in the box." Underneath was a small velvet box. Daniel got down on one knee. "Rachel Parker, I love you. I love your strength and your kindness, and how you never gave up on believing in happy endings. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Rachel cried. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times. Yes." The restaurant erupted in applause. The same people who'd witnessed her humiliation a year ago were now cheering for her joy. The wedding was set for April, outdoors at Anna's house under the oak trees. Rachel walked down the aisle on her own. She was choosing this, choosing Daniel, under her own power. When it was time for vows, Rachel said, "A year and a half ago, I walked into a restaurant feeling like I wasn't enough. And then you stood up. You showed me that healing isn't about forgetting what hurt us. It's about building something beautiful around the scars. Daniel, you didn't save me. I saved myself. But you held my hand while I did it. Today, I'm choosing to spend the rest of my life with you." Daniel's vows were equally emotional. "Rachel, you taught me that it's okay to move forward, that healing isn't betrayal. You're not used goods. You're not second best. You're my first miracle." When they were pronounced husband and wife, Rachel felt like her heart might burst with happiness. 6 months after the wedding, Rachel published her first novel, a story about a woman learning that her worth wasn't determined by who had left her, but by who she chose to become. The dedication read, "For Daniel, who showed me that kindness changes everything. And for Eli, who taught me that love doesn't require perfection." That night, Rachel opened her journal and wrote, "A year and a half ago, a man called me used goods in a crowded restaurant. In that moment, I believed him. But then another man stood up, not because he knew me, not because he wanted something from me, but because he saw a fellow human being in pain and couldn't walk away. That single act of kindness changed my life. Since then, I've learned that healing isn't linear, that being a single mother doesn't make me broken, it makes me brave. That my past is part of my story, but not the whole story. Most importantly, I've learned that I am enough, just as I am. I am not used goods. I am whole. I am worthy. I am loved. Rachel closed the journal, feeling peaceful, complete. 2 years after that fateful night, Rachel stood in the kitchen of the home she shared with Daniel, making breakfast for her family. Eli and Lily argued good-naturedly at the table. Daniel wrapped his arms around her waist. "Good morning, wife," he murmured. "Good morning." "Husband," she replied. Later that day, Rachel got a message from a woman she'd never met. "I read your book last week, and it made me cry. I'm a single mom too, and I've been feeling exactly how you described. But your story gave me hope. Thank you." Rachel wrote back, "You are not used up. You are not less than. You are healing and growing. You deserve everything good. Keep going. It gets better. I promise." This was what healing looked like. Not perfect, but real and loved and enough. If you're reading this story and it touched something in you, if you've ever felt broken or used or not enough, please know that you're not alone. One act of kindness can change everything. Stand up for yourself. Stand up for others. See people's humanity. Choose kindness. Choose healing. Choose to believe in second chances. If this story reminded you of the power of compassion, please like, comment, and share it. Subscribe to hear more stories about kindness and healing, because every story shared is another reminder that we're not alone, that healing is possible, that love is worth fighting for. You are not used goods. You are not broken. You are enough. You always were.